Hey everyone, this is Tara with Tara's Tuesday Talk. Thank you again for letting me be a part of your week and for just taking a moment to have a quick conversation together around stories, the power of stories. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about what it means for ourselves personally when we join someone's story. Before we jump into that, I want to share another story with you. But this one, it's a personal story, but it's also the story of someone who I don't even remember their name. They would be about 10 years old right now. And every time I think of her and her story, I'm sad and I have regret. But at the same time, I have to know that the Lord is in charge always of our stories. So this story is about a little girl that I met while working in the public orphanage. The public orphanage, Nueva Esperanza, that led to everything, organically starting foster care, getting our own son, Judah. There's a lot of stories wrapped up in that orphanage for many of you as well who got to come and visit or who helped support the children as we were able to get them out of that public orphanage. But there was one little girl who I very, very specifically remember her face. I remember what she looked like. I remember taking care of her because we would visit the orphanage regularly, this public orphanage that was just packed with kids in just horrible conditions and situations. And we just started to go all the time just to help feed the mini babies, change diapers, cut fingernails. And I just remember this little girl and I remember her face. She was probably 4 or 5 months old. Among 15 other 4 or 5 month olds throughout 2 years. We met many babies during that time and had many helpers, helping hands being there with us. But for some reason, this little girl's face just stuck with me. And maybe it's because her story was one that I feel like we didn't get to alter, like the many other children, about 40 others that we were able to alter their stories through the power of the Lord and devoted partners and staff as well. And so I don't remember her name, but I very specifically remember, I believe we were already able to get some of the babies out and into foster homes. And this one we didn't get out. She ended up going to an orphanage and we even got to visit her at that orphanage shortly afterwards. I don't remember exactly why, but I remember walking into the room of the new orphanage, which was much better than the public orphanage, where babies very often got pneumonia from the conditions in there and got sick. All had scabies and lice because of the filth. This orphanage was clean. There was open windows. The ambience was so much better, but I remember it was very silent in this orphanage baby room with about 6 cribs. I remember when we went in, I don't know why, but there wasn't a worker in there. There was nobody holding a baby. There was nobody feeding a baby. The babies were all quiet. And typically that happens when they just have not had their cries responded to. They just quit crying. They learn to be on the feeding schedule of every 3 hours. I'm going to get fed, so they don't cry even if they're hungry at another time or wet because they're or dirty because their diapers get changed on a schedule as well. And so it was just very quiet, which isn't normal for a room full of 6 babies. And I just remember looking at her and wanting to pick her up, wanting to take her home personally, wanting to hold her, cuddle her, give her anything I could as a mother. And I didn't. It wasn't appropriate. We were just visiting, getting to know the orphanage because we helped orphanages at the time and assessed if we had any programs that would benefit them. We did not end up working with that orphanage regularly. They had a lot of resources. But this was the norm. This was the norm. We've visited over, I don't even know now, maybe 40 orphanages by this time. And this was the norm for the baby room. And so this little girl got put there and I've never seen her again. And like I said, I don't remember her name, but her story has stuck with me because she was one, for some reason, there were several we didn't get out and placed into foster homes when they emptied that orphanage because as a public orphanage, it was just really bad conditions and the government didn't want to keep running it. They knew they didn't have the resources to run it well. And so that orphanage got emptied and a lot of the kids went to orphanages. So she wasn't the only one, but for some reason her story really stuck with me. And I just have to look at that and just remember that that's why we keep doing what we do every day. That's why we don't give up. That's why we push through even when things get hard. And that's why we fight for family-based care in Honduras and globally and raise awareness. And so her story is the same as hundreds and thousands of other babies that the government or the locals don't have another option but to put them in an orphanage. The orphanage is doing the best they can with the resources they have, but these babies don't get what they need, what they receive from a family, and so they don't develop as well, and they struggle with attachment. Even though a lot of the orphanages provide amazing education, it can't replace what they needed as little guys, what they needed to get from caretakers, from a one-on-one caretaker, because that actually helps develop their brain. And so when they get to the age that they can take advantage of the education, they usually haven't developed well enough to take advantage of the education. They haven't made the connections in their brain that they needed to be able to absorb that wonderful education. And then a lot of times they also have behavioral issues because of the way they developed as little guys, and so even then they can't take advantage of it because of the behavior issues. And so while all of this can be conquered if they do get to finally enter a family, the majority don't. The majority grow up in that orphanage and leave at 18, and very few have the capacity, because of the way that they developed as babies and toddlers, very few have the capacity to go on to higher education and take advantage of the funding that a lot of these orphanages actually have, simply because they didn't have a one-on-one caretaker. And so while some orphanages have conquered that and figured out how to maybe do a family style where they have consistent caretaker for them for the whole 18 years, very few. I think we've met like 2 in all of Honduras that have been able to implement that sort of program. So we really, really realize that foster care is a better answer. Family preservation is a better answer for these kids. And stories like this little girl keep reminding me of that, and while we do that work. And so I wanted to tell you and share her story today, because it is part of my story, but even more so, it's the story of thousands of children growing up and babies still going to orphanages throughout Honduras and globally. And so as we ask you this December, we're having a campaign for Identity Mission called Join the Story. We're asking you to hear the stories of locals and how you've impacted their story, but we're also asking you to consider joining the story of the unknown, the unnamed. There's about 11,000 children in orphanages here in Honduras, and while we don't know all their stories and we don't even know their names, we know what it's like based on research and having met these other children and having been able to prevent some of these children from entering orphanages. We can see, actually, you've prevented, since 2015, being a part of Identity Mission, you've prevented about 95 children from ever having to enter an orphanage and suffer the effects of being one of many, and not getting the attention that they need, and being neglected. You've prevented that. And so seeing these 95 children and how they've developed and how they've grown and where they are now, some of them have been in the program since 2015, and we can see they're normal, everyday kids. They're doing well in school. Their attachment is right on target. So if they get adopted or reintegrated, or if they're still with their bio family, they have a very healthy attachment. And we can see that difference from the kids we worked with in the orphanages. And so you've impacted their stories in such a huge way, so that we know that if we keep raising up advocates, if we keep raising up partners, we can impact another 95 and change those stories as well. And so that's why I wanted to share her story with you today, just to remind us, the ones we're trying to reach, why we're not ending our work, while we're not just saying, oh good, things are going well, foster care is moving forward. We can't stop there, because more and more kids need us to join their story. And so that's my plea, my call out to you, my reminder that the Lord asked us to be a part of this call. And not just one of us, not just those who work in orphan care, but each and every one of us have a part to play. That's why he gave us all the call to the orphan and the widow, is because he knew it's going to take all of us to reach all of them. Actually, there's somewhat of a statistic that's been figured out here in Honduras, and I think it's very similar for the States. If one family in every church would foster or take in or adopt, whatever, would just care for one child that's in the foster care system. Here in Honduras, it's one child that's in the orphanage. If one family in every church in Honduras would care for one child in an orphanage, we literally would have no more children in orphanages. That's about the correlation between how many churches and how many kids in orphanages there are. And if I recall correctly, it's very similar in the States. If one family from every church in the States would care for one kid, there wouldn't be any more children in the foster care program. And so He's called us all not to foster because we only need one family in each church, right? But to be a part of it so that whether it's an adoptive family, a foster family, or a struggling biological family, if we all do our part in helping them literally through the body of Christ, through the church, God can take care of every orphan. And I know there's a lot more to that. That seems very like, oh, simple, but there's a lot more to it, but obviously it also gives us perspective that if we do our part, our role, whether it's funding, volunteering, babysitting, or fostering or adopting, the Lord literally can do what he promised to do in his word, and that's place the lonely in families and answer the call and the cry of the orphan and the fatherless. He can do that through us. And so just want to encourage you today and this month, as we are having this conversation and running the December campaign for Join the Story, I want to encourage you to really not just donate, please donate, because we've got to reach our goal of 150,000, and I shared why last Tuesday talk. But it's not just that. It's not just to support. That's part of it, definitely, but it's also to realize in your own life what joining the story means for you, and we talked about you sharing your story and the power of that, and how someone's waiting for you to share that story so that they can be impacted and then share their story or join someone else's story. And it's all a part of the masterpiece that God's creating among his body. But just to remember, like, his promise to us as we join this story and do our part, whatever it is, we don't need to be called to orphan care. He called us all to helping each other and vulnerable children and families. But what we can realize is the reason he called us to that is because it impacts our lives as well. And so there's more to that verse in James, that says, he called us to the orphan and the widow. It says, so that we can remain uncorrupted from the world, that it's pure religion and it keeps us from being corrupted by the world. And the thing is, we've got so much going on. We have our jobs, we have our families, we have our children, we have the fun things that we do in life, and they're all beautiful, and they're all supposed to be an intricate part of us. And so he called us also to do the work, his work here on earth, whether it's orphan care or evangelism. We're all supposed to be part of all of it. And the thing is, when he said that if we're a part of helping the orphan and the widow in their distress, and we believe that's orphan care and family preservation wrapped up into one, then we stay uncorrupted from the world. And that thing is basically totally, and we can attest to this, if you are getting yourself super involved in joining people's stories and being a part of whatever you can find to be a part of for answering the call to the orphan or the widow, you're too busy. You're too busy to get corrupted by the world, because you got all these other parts of your life going on. And then if you say, yes, I'm going to do my part in orphan care and family preservation as well, the thing is, you're not going to have time to be corrupted by the world. You're not going to have time to be bored and fall into that sin. It really, really keeps you for that, because basically you don't have time. And so there's a lot more to that, and I could go on and on about how I've seen through our own personal life, our marriage, our family's journey, that because we've said yes here and there, like right now, we're doing respite for a little gal, or we're taking food to another family that just got, a placement, or we're throwing a Christmas party for all of our families. Like, whatever is going on, I can tell you from our personal journey that, being a little bit of a part, or when we were overwhelmed and every day, all day in an orphanage trying to feed babies, whatever season it is, and however much we are answering that call, whether it's just a little bit through the week, financially, or it's every day, like, everybody has a different role to play, and we have different seasons that we're going to have, different parts of the work, I guess I'm trying to say. But no matter which part we're playing, because nothing's too little, whether it's the minimal, because this is what we have time for, what we have finances for, or whether it's exploded and we're spending a whole year on the mission field, like whatever it might be, or launching a foster care support program in our church, like whatever it might be, whatever season we're in, it's always going to keep us uncorrupted from the world, whether it's just what we feel like is just a little bit of our time and finances, or a lot of our time and a lot of our finances. The promise the Lord has for us as we join each other's stories, as we choose to be the body of Christ in these areas, is that it's totally going to keep us uncorrupted from the world, and it's going to bring us so much joy. No sorrow comes with it. And so I just want to encourage you today, not only to join this story, because we need these partners to be able to keep more children out of orphanages here. So don't only join the story for that, but join the story for yourself, because God has peace and joy in that journey as you find your spot and you dedicate that time to Him. He has many promises for you. And so thank you for letting me chat this out with you a little bit. Sorry if it was a little scattered, but it was what was on my heart to share with you today, to share the story of this little girl who probably is still in that orphanage and probably is 10 years old. Maybe one day I'll get to find out. But thank you for letting me share her story, which I think represents thousands and thousands of children's stories that need us to join in their story and impact their lives. So have a great Tuesday, guys. Thanks for chatting with me.